Come along to Thursdays Off the Ball. Nathan with you until 10 o'clock this evening. There is only one story dominating Irish sport. Is Martin O'Neill about to leave his position as Republic of Ireland manager? John Giles, Shay Given, Richard Dunn, Liam Lawrence, Guillaume Ballaghay, Colin Young, all coming your way between now and 10 o'clock. Do you even care if Martin O'Neill stays or not? Do let us know. 53106 is the text number. It is a star-studded lineup on tonight's show. We're in our new studio as well. We're live on Facebook. Hello to everybody who is watching on Facebook or on Periscope. Check out facebook.com/off the ball. It's kind of OTB PM to go with the AM. And to celebrate such a momentous night, I did say star-studded, and Dan McDonnell just adding.
Listen, I didn't realise it was such a momentous show until a couple of minutes ago, and then the Martin O'Neill thing sort of broke as well. It's all just come together very nicely. Yeah. Will
O'Callaghan is here as well. How are you? Nathan? Good. So it's been quite a day. At lunchtime, I'd resigned myself to the fact that Martin O'Neill was leaving. Now it seems that Quique Sanchez Flores, who couldn't be attracted by Quique Sanchez Flores, is the odds-on favourite. I've gone through a range of emotions about Martin O'Neill. At first, there was sort of disappointment that Martin O'Neill, who, our manager, has done a good job, gave us that Robbie Brady moment, that unforgettable moment. Right, he had one bad night. I was a bit disappointed that he was leaving. Then I was sort of content that actually we'd just been bloody humiliated in our last game, and maybe the style of football wasn't great. Maybe it was time to move on. Today, in the last couple of hours, it's moved to anger. Who do Stoke City think they are that they can say no to our manager? That they can drag him all the way to Stoke and then say, you're grand.
Who do they think they are?
Who do they think they are?
They probably think they're a club looking for a manager that's able to speak to managers that don't have contracts.
They're wrecking Irish football.
I mean, do they
possibly for years to come?
Should they call up and say, listen, you haven't got round to signing the new deal yet, so I mean, we're just letting you know. You can go ahead and do it if you want, or we're going to keep our options open. I think what is interesting about today is that you're speaking there about your range of emotions changing across the day. I think it's unusual that you probably have a situation whereby the FAI and the employers of the Irish national team manager are possibly in a similar situation, waiting to see how developments play out somewhere else, in terms of determining, do they have the manager that they wanted to offer a contract to in charge for the next couple of years? And what we have is something that is well known now, that Martin O'Neill, was on the Stoke list. I mean, he has spoken with people from Stoke. It's going to be very hard for them to deny that if they end up going with Quique Sanchez Flores. And what we have is a situation whereby it's always been very hypothetical in terms of O'Neill's position. But now we know that he's willing to speak to someone if the right job comes up, and that presents a difficulty for the FAI, who didn't tie him down and avoid that from happening.
For people who aren't in the luxurious position of spending all day online and on Twitter and refreshing and seeing what the latest is, where do we stand right now, 7 o'clock Thursday evening?
Yeah, I think we've had various phases across the day. I mean, at the start of the week, we had sort of FAI confidence that Martin O'Neill was going to be staying no matter what, but I think Gary Rowell was obviously in the picture at that stage. People probably would be aware of that part of the equation. Martin O'Neill has met people from Stoke. There was discussions last night, yesterday. There was more discussions today. However, it's emerged that a delegation from Stoke have also gone to Barcelona to speak to Quique Sanchez Flores about the job, and the suggestions is that he would be their preference, and that any discussion with him, naturally because he's in employment at the moment, would involve a longer term contract and a compensation fee. O'Neill is an easier fit because there is no compensation issue, but also it would appear that from Martin O'Neill's perspective, it may be dangerous to assume that he's mad to take this job, because it seems Stoke potentially might be viewing him slightly more so as a shorter term option. And I think for Martin O'Neill to leave a job and go there, he would probably want a longer term deal. So we are left in the waiting game territory. Espanyol are playing at the moment, and they're playing away to Levante in the Copa del Rey. That game is ongoing.
2-0. Oh, what does that mean? Does that make him more attractive? That suddenly Stoke are going to spend the £4 million?
It means nothing, but we can make it mean something by around 8:15.
Well, it does mean that Quique Sanchez Flores more than likely is going to talk to the Spanish media afterwards.
That's
where surely it'll be the first question, and we may get some sort of an insight into what he's going to do, because all we've heard so far is that he's going to leave it until tomorrow to decide whether he wants to go or not.
And the one thing also, a big point on this was that Stoke wanted someone by Monday.
They go to Manchester United
on Monday night. They may be willing to wait as well, and I don't think Martin O'Neill is going to make maybe if he's not getting the right soundings, he may not make a quick decision. Flores obviously might want a bit of time if there's issues to be thrashed out here. So this may not necessarily be resolved tonight. I think there was a feeling earlier that it was going to be resolved today. I'm not so sure that will necessarily be the case. Could be tomorrow.
There's an awful lot in this in terms of what may happen, and if he does take the job, the questions of why he wasn't tied down to actually signing the contract. If he doesn't get the job, how he actually now comes back. Is it the end for Martin O'Neill and Ireland? Either way, that's not even getting into where Roy Keane fits into all of this, especially if Martin O'Neill doesn't get the job and decides to go anyways. Does Roy stay? Is he still in line? We're going to get to all that. As I said, we've John Giles coming up at 7:30. We also have a little bit of non-football this evening. I was talking to Michael Fennelly, 8-time All-Ireland winner with Kilkenny a little bit earlier on, about his retirement. He's got some great stories of working with Brian Cody and all he's learned under Brian Cody. So that's coming up at 8 o'clock. At 8:30, Shay Given will join us on the line. Probably nobody better positioned to talk about all this. Former Stoke player, worked with Roy Keane when Roy was a temporary assistant at Aston Villa, and obviously part of the squad under Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane. Richard Dunn is going to join us on the football show. So too Guillaume Balaguer, who certainly seems to be on top of the Quique Sanchez Flores side of things. So that's all coming up in the football show. But your independent colleague Colin Young is on the line. The two of you have been breaking stories on this over the past 48 hours or so. Evening, Colin.
Evening, lads. How are you doing?
So the story this morning was that Martin O'Neill had initial contact with Stoke, that talks were going to continue throughout today, and possibility of an announcement by tonight, press conference tomorrow in the dugout at Old Trafford on Monday night. Has that changed over the past 12 hours or so?
I think that the emergence from Spain of Flores as possibly a preferred option to O'Neill, who it would appear as not terribly interested in temporary or short-term arrangements if he's going to walk away from Ireland. I think he's looking for a longer contract, and it's a question of which one of the two either fancies it most or Stoke City are prepared to go for. And it does look like this time yesterday with Martin O'Neill definitely in a position to speak to Stoke. The job was kind of his for the taking, or certainly his to consider on Stoke's terms at that stage. But if Flores is going to turn the job down, and he's perhaps in a position where it sounds like he's looking for more reassurances for Espanyol as well. Guillaume earlier today was talking about they'd reneged on certain promises. So I guess if that situation changes and he's happier staying in Spain, then Martin, comes back in as the favourite again.
But as a number two choice, it seems, for some of those in the Stoke hierarchy, do you think that's going to have an effect on how this plays out over the next couple of days? Do you think it's a done deal if Quique Sanchez Flores decides, I'm happy with my life here in Barcelona, I'm happy with Espanyol, that Martin O'Neill will take this job?
I think that the situation the Stoke board have found themselves at the moment is that they've got two main candidates, and they're kind of neck and neck. Flores perhaps just edging the race at the moment, but I think that they are in a position where they're going to take the better option and take their time, and if that means that there's a perception that O'Neill was never the first choice or was certainly second choice, I think that that's a hit that they'll be prepared to take as long as they get the right man in the job. And as it stands at the moment, Martin O'Neill has clearly had talks with Stoke. He is less happy with the terms that have been offered to him, which would appear to be a more short-term solution rather than looking ahead to 4 or 5 years. So I don't think that the Stoke board necessarily, as it stands at the moment, see either one of the two of those as the favourite, even though the media or the bookies would always prefer that to be the case. I think that they're weighing up options, and whoever decides they wants the job more is probably the one that's going to be in a stronger position.
This isn't the first time that Martin O'Neill has been linked with other jobs. There was the possibility of going to Leicester City around the time they appointed Claudio Ranieri. Right now, and the criticism and the way it seems that Martin O'Neill was so stung by the criticism after the defeat to Denmark, and I know you know Martin O'Neill and you have a good understanding of him. Like, did that criticism sting him to such an extent that it changed his entire attitude towards this job, that maybe he started looking at the Ireland job as more hassle than it was worth?
I don't think that the Denmark criticism would necessarily have brought him to making that assumption. I think that he's always been fairly prickly about the criticism that he's received with the resources that he's got with Ireland. And, you know, if you remember him in the, I can't remember which month it was, October I think it was, when, going back to the Georgia draw, I mean, he was in such foul humour at that point that if John Delaney had offered him a £10 million contract and put it in front of his nose as they were on the way back from Tbilisi, I don't think he would have signed it. And I think he's always, from what I've gathered, he's always had a feeling that there's one more club job left in him, that he's at an age where he needs to have that job now sooner rather than later, and that, you know, perhaps the Ireland job 3 and a bit years has reached its natural conclusion, and that while there is or was a gentleman's verbal agreement in place when the current contract, or the contract that's now expired, was expiring. Who knows when it does actually expire, by the way, but anyway, he was getting to the point where he wanted the verbal agreement, John Delaney. He got it, but was Martin always going to keep his options open? I think absolutely, and not just decent Premier League jobs were always going to come up at some point of this year and this season, but decent Championship jobs as well, and I'm sure that Middlesbrough had a sniff round when they were looking for a new manager, even though Tony Pulis seemed to be the only choice. I mean, there were other jobs that were always becoming available, not just to Martin but to Roy Keane as well, and the pair are an attractive. They're an attractive pair for a club because they're still box office. Roy in particular, you know, he can read out a shopping list and it's back page news over here still. So there's undoubtedly an attraction to the pair, and I think that it was inevitable, and in fact I wrote this back in October, September, it was inevitable that the longer that contract remains unsigned, and it still is unsigned, that clubs were going to basically tap him up, and of course he'd be interested in a Premier League job. As much as the island is attractive, as much as it's a job that he coveted for a while, you know, he's given international management a dabble. There are Premier League jobs going to become available, and I think it was inevitable he would be sounded out, and as we saw yesterday, interested in talking to people.
All right, good stuff, Colin. Thanks a lot for taking the call.
Anytime, Nathan. All the best.
Colin Young there. Just looking at the immediate texts that are coming in, Ronan saying, how can the FAI now co-sign the contracts of O'Neill, Keane and Guppy, knowing that they were happy to leave their jobs? Let him go. If his head is turned so easily by a relegation bound club, then he can't be too pushed about the Irish job. That text coming in at 53106 from Anne. Like, I know there's no room for sentiment, and we know what sort of a dirty game football is, but Martin O'Neill does have a gentleman's agreement, a handshake, a statement that he knows was released by the FAI, an interview with an FAI official that was posted on their website saying that he had agreed a deal to stay on to the 2020 European Championship. Now, he never said during that anything was signed, but he said it was agreed. I do just wonder, Martin O'Neill at 65, the career he's had, like, just how comfortable a decision this is for him to just walk out like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was always the sense that it was the FAI who were very keen to get that announcement done in the first place. So maybe Martin O'Neill's out from this would be, well, actually, lads, I mean, you were very anxious to get me signed up here, so, you know, the ball's in my court as such. I've actually, I've changed my mind. It might be easier for him to break that in that scenario rather than a situation where maybe he forced the situation and they're saying, hang on. They say retrospectively, well, actually, you came to us. You really wanted to get this tied down. I think that response from even just from text and stuff is interesting because, the public mood probably towards O'Neill probably was affected naturally by the Danish result. And when you're trying to sell stuff for the year ahead, you're trying to sell this rebuilding job and so on, you're trying to say, okay, there's no home games arranged, I think, because they know it's probably going to be difficult to sell. But anyway, I think this presents a difficult situation for all concerned, where he's fully on board, but maybe he wanted to go. It just chips away, it just leaves you that one bit closer, one other bad result away.
Well for the FAI in the end. So initially, obviously, it looked like a great thing when we went to
very Machiavellian approach.
4 days later, and we have him tied down to a contract. Then there's the humiliation of the defeat to Denmark, and suddenly there's question marks. Now actually it turns out maybe Martin O'Neill wasn't that committed long term, and maybe the FAI were better off just holding off a little while, instead of having a situation where we don't have a competitive game technically until March of next year, where he has signed a contract, and next summer there's 5 jobs going in the Premier League and he's been linked with 4 of them. Now to get in 4 or 5 months earlier, get it all sorted.
I think it's going to be hard for the FAI to portray a sort of conclusion where they were in control of this situation, that they allowed this to happen.
Even just looking at the text, I think...
Well, you think it could be a fortunate outcome?
The initial public reaction is against Martin O'Neill, that Martin O'Neill is the one who has done some wrong here.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I would have thought there would be a view that, well, how have you allowed, if this manager is a prized asset, how have you allowed this situation to materialise? Maybe you might end up with the right result for what people want by sort of circumstances that aren't ideal. But again, in October, the FAI were desperate to get him to stay. So 3 months later, for them to come out and try and spin it in some way that actually they were relaxed enough about this, I think that to me is a tough one to sell.
Yeah, we'll get into that a lot more as to exactly how the FAI, as you say, their most prized employee, the most important employee within the entire organisation, was allowed to go on for 2 months without signing a contract. So all that coming between now and 10 o'clock. And as I say, Shay Given, Richard Dunn, Guillaume Ballagate, John Giles at 7:30. Will, take us through the news round. I presume this is the only story.
It is. Quique Sanchez-Flores, Nathan, has emerged as the front-runner to be the next Stoke City manager. Stoke officials met with the former Watford boss in Barcelona this week ahead of the second leg of their Copa del Rey tie, which is against Levante in Valencia this evening. The Potters have also held talks with the Republic of Ireland boss Martin O'Neill, but he's reportedly not their first choice. It would cost €4 million to release Flores from his current deal at Espanyol, which runs until 2019, while compensation for O'Neill would not be required, as he's not yet signed a verbally agreed contract extension with the FAI. Spanish football expert Guillaume Ballagate had mentioned earlier today, I know he's on the football show later, that Flores is expected to make a decision not tonight but tomorrow morning after that game against Levante. The Stoke coach Kevin Russell, he was wheeled out in front of the media this afternoon, and he says whoever succeeds Mark Hughes will be a very lucky manager.
Whoever comes in, they're coming into a fantastic football club. The gaffer's left it in very good hands, from the bottom to the top in the infrastructure of it, as you say, and with the board, whoever comes in as well, it's a local run football club, as we know, local owners who, over the years, I think with 2 managers over the last 12 years, whoever comes in is going to be a lucky manager. It's a top football club, and just helping out the training, helping him out. I don't think there is a timescale on it. I just think obviously the owners want to make sure it's the right person that fits the right glove, which can be difficult. So I'm sure they try and get it done as soon as possible, but I'm sure that they're doing all the due diligence that needs to be done, and hopefully they come up with the right person.
You have to assume, with all the money swirling around the Premier League, that it will be a pay rise for Flores to come over here.
Oh yeah,
or come to Stoke and take that job, but at the same time, living in Barcelona, living a good life.
Yeah, I mean, you would think it's in terms of optics, it might be a nicer. But then again, I don't think anyone who plays for Stoke actually lives in Stoke. Yeah. I think they all sort of
live in Manchester,
Liverpool, wherever it might be. But yeah, I think it would be a bump. I think there has been suggestions, reports this year he hasn't maybe been happy with the financial picture at Espanyol. So I think it's certainly financially the Premier League is where the cash is at.
That could be a manager moving from Spain to England. A player moving from England to Spain is Francis Coquelin. He's completed his move to Valencia today for €15 million. He had been at Arsenal since 2008. Manchester United have entered the race to sign the Arsenal forward Alexis Sanchez. The Guardian and Sky Italia this afternoon reported that United have lodged a £25 million bid for the Chile international, who's out of contract at the end of the season. Sanchez is also being heavily linked with a move to Man City. They're believed to have bid around $20 million earlier this week. The Premier League leaders also had a deadline day bid rejected at the end of last summer.
This could get very interesting over the next few weeks, and wouldn't you like to be Alexis Sanchez's agent?
Yeah, listen, you can't lose from this situation, but surely City aren't going to allow this happen. If it would have seemed to have been pretty much laid out in the last couple of months, there's relationships there. It would be pretty surprising if they took their eye off the ball and lost them from this position to their rivals. I know
you'd wonder how many players at City and United are tied into deals that they have to match the highest earner at the club.
Yeah, no, that's true, and that is another element to it. And the other thing as well is that obviously Manchester United have players out of contract in the summer, some big earning players out of contract in the summer, and maybe they're just in a position to go way over the odds because there's almost a point scoring value in getting someone ahead of City, and then it's worth it then. But I still think from Sanchez's perspective, it'd be a curious move, I think.
Well, as somebody pointed out, would you like to be like this roving number 10 in the greatest club team of all time, are probably playing as a right wing back under Mourinho?
This is a problem. This is maybe a slight stretch, but the point sort of stands, yeah.
Doesn't look like Naby Keita will be moving to Liverpool this month. The deal is in place for the Guinea midfielder to join the Reds this summer. Recent reports had claimed they're willing to pay €14 million this month to bring that move forward after Philippe Coutinho signed for Barcelona. But Leipzig, their coach, has said today there's no reason to let him go before the end of the current season. The French League have also decided to immediately suspend the use of goal line technology after a series of glitches with the system, particularly two big errors during a League Cup quarter-final last night. France does use a different manufacturer to the one used in the Premier League. They're also trialling VAR in France currently as well.
One bit of interesting transfer news from the League of Ireland.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a fall from grace for Adam Morgan, who's gone to Sligo Rovers. He played in the Europa League.
People in Sligo aren't really here.
Someone ain't go to Sligo on their weekend.
It's not a fall from grace if you're coming from Halifax, or is that what you're actually saying? I don't know. Maybe not.
I think it's probably more just kind of a drop in his career over the last 5 seasons. As Dan mentioned, he's gone down through the leagues and was playing for the English Conference side, Halifax Town, but he moves to the showgrounds after what's been called a determined pursuit by the Rovers manager Gerard Little. He is only 23 years of age, and he featured in that Being Liverpool documentary with Brendan Rodgers, where Brendan Rodgers was saying that he soaks up information like a sponge and felt he had a very good future at the time.
Did he text Brendan Rodgers when he was leaving Halifax to go to Sligo? Maybe his name was one of the names in the envelope.
But every Liverpool fan seems to have heard of him. Like, I said, the name rang a bell, but there was a huge response to this transfer last night, just all over social media.
Well, if there's one thing all Liverpool supporters know, it's the next big thing.
The next Robbie Fowler. Robbie Fowler spoke.
Robbie Fowler's goal scoring records at youth level must have been broken about 15 times at this stage.
Yeah, exactly. And Fowler, there was a Fowler quote or two about him as well, which meant he was the next big thing. But yeah, new start for him now.
All right, Will, you're going to be with us for the evening. You'll bring us up to date with everything else that's happening. Dan is going to be here as well. I know you're busy on the old day job as well. You'll keep us up to date with all the breaking news. I don't want to open the Indo tomorrow and see something that you didn't tell us tonight.
Listen, you got to play the game sometimes, Nathan.
Jesus, lad, stop talking around the issue. Do a Joe Duffy poll on it and take a 10-minute text poll. Should they stay or should they go? Could we do that, JP? A 10-minute text poll. JP is refusing to do a 10-minute text poll. So we've got Richard Dunn, Shay Given, Michael Fennelly all coming up a little bit later in the show. But it is Thursday night and there is a lot to talk to John Giles about. He's up next.
Off the Ball on Newstalk.
In association with the Air Sport app, allowing you to cast your favourite sporting action from your tablet or mobile phone straight to your TV.
Newstalk Breakfast.
The trend in obesity, it only goes one way, and the two big issues here. One is that once you become obese, the likelihood is you will remain obese or overweight for the rest of your life. And secondly, and more importantly, the increase in type 2 diabetes associated with obesity and overweight, I believe, will probably bankrupt both healthcare systems in the world within 50 years, including Ireland.